Senate Chamber. Signed. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate chamber. Sound.
Okay, Mary and Stephen. Sorry. The way you get used to it. Okay. That's us, Chair. We're live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the 64th meeting of the Committee for Finance in the 22 to 27 mandate. As always, this meeting is recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. Anyone in the public gallery or indeed members, please keep your phone on silent airplane mode or switch it off. Agenda item 1, apologies. We don't have apologies, but we have several members who've indicated they'll join on Zoom. Declaration of interest. Does any member have an interest they wish to declare? Deputy Chair?
Yeah, APS to the Education Minister.
Thank you very much. Okay. Agenda item 3, pardon me. If some members wish to declare another interest as we go along, that's fine. Agenda item 3 is Chairperson's business. With the correspondence from the Department of Finance, Permanent Secretary, in relation to our request submitted after last week's meeting. That is at page table 3. We agreed to write to the Permanent Secretary around matters to do with the Civil Service Code. He has written back to say he cannot see us today, so we don't have an oral briefing with him today. He also said that his evidence would be, his and his officials' evidence would be limited to determine policy in respect of the civil service, i.e. rather than specific instances. DOF sets the ethical standards for NICs, the rules that flow from them, and the processes to address alleged misconduct. So the briefing is not going to happen today, but it is for next week. So that's for members to note. If anyone's yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
Deputy Chair.
thank you, Chair. And I just want to make the point at this time that I think the response from the Permanent Secretary is quite comprehensive and good, sets out very precisely what the rules are with regard to the Code of Ethics and the Functional Government Act as those that sit with the Department of Finance. And as I had raised last week, I felt that this investigation sat primarily with the Department of Education and with their committee to look at how the Code of Ethics was applied within their committee in the first instance. And I think that this letter just clearly vindicates that position, so I think that it's really good to have that clarity on record, and I don't know if we want to share that with other committees, because I think it's a good setting out of
I'm
the
happy to share with
rules.
other committees, yeah. I'm happy to share with other committees. I mean, as I said, the purpose of this was to talk about issues that are broader than one specific instance that have been highlighted by a specific case. I think it's important that we do ask those questions in broad terms, but comments noted and on the record, and we will have that session next week and people can raise those. Obviously the specifics do fall in terms of going through the Department of Education, the Education Committee, and I believe that's happening today.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, membership content, we'll move on. Agenda item 4 is draft minutes of last week's meeting on the 5th of November, so that's at page 7 of the meeting pack. Members are content with the minutes at page 7, that they're a true reflection. I'll sign them. Content? Okay. Agenda item 5 is matters arising. We are going to go into closed session for the first 3 matters that are arising. If we can, Heather, thank you. So,
Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate chamber. signed, Senate Chamber, 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 signed, Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound.
The latter one that we have agreed that we are going to seek a briefing, first written, then oral, in the weeks to come with internal audit officials at the department about the findings of internal audit documentation that they have sent us. It is not confidentially marked, but at this point we will respect the fact that they have asked for it not to be public, but we will treat it as expect to treat it as public whenever we have our session, which is hopefully in the not too distant future. We will ask for specific responses to areas of, in particular, red, but also amber, and whether they are confident that actions are being taken to deal with the issues that are identified in that report. And we will touch on it in broad terms with the Finance Department Permanent Secretary next week, who's with us on other issues, and we'll just give him an opportunity to give us an initial response at that stage. So those are the actions we agreed in closed session, if members are content.
Just the other one, the electronic folder that members will have access to
yes,
for correspondence.
Yes, and there will be an electronic folder relating to the first matter that we discussed that members will have access to should they wish to look at those items. People are content with both of those actions. Great. We'll then go to item 5.4, which is a set of readout responses from the DALO. 5.5 is relates to the India Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. That's at page 275 of the meeting pack. The Department has confirmed there is no differentiation between GB and NI with regards to that agreement. So that's to note. 5.6 is Strategic Asset Management Unit, aka SAMU, interaction with. Is that the name of the wheel in SeaWorld? Every time I say that, I think is that
Shamu.
Right.
Shamu.
Okay. Now I've clarified that, I can deal with this without getting distracted. Interaction with the Next Estate Strategy. That's at page 276. The committee previously asked the Department for information on how SAMU and Next Estate Strategy interacts. This information has been provided. The Department highlights there is regular engagement between Properties Division and the forthcoming Next Asset Management Strategy. Members will have an opportunity to explore this further at our visit to LPS in the new year. So that's to note pending the visit to LPS. That's the reason. Item 5.7 is a related matter. That is Marlborough House. 278 of the meeting pack. The committee previously asked the department to keep it informed of developments in relation to Marlborough House, which is obviously the brutalist building in Craigavon. The department has provided an assurance that they will keep us informed if we wish to come in on Marlborough House. But anyway, we'll move on. I'm sure we may have the opportunity to talk about it at some point. 5.8 relates to Tell Us Once. This is page 279 of the meeting pack. The committee previously asked for a readout for a meeting between the Finance and Communities Minister, regarding the Tell Us Once service to NI. The committee has been informed that officials in both departments will take forward work to clarify the details of precisely what legislative changes would be required and if they can be achieved in the current mandate. This includes additional research into the operational options available should the legislative changes be achieved following the enactment of the Deaths, Stillbirths and Baby Loss Bill. This could include a meeting with colleagues in HMRC to explore the possibility of connecting directly into the Tell Us One system utilised in GB. So that's to seek members' agreement to seek a further update in due course. So they've given us a response on what was discussed at that meeting. I think there were several other issues discussed at that meeting, one of which was, so members, this is just on the back of that, one of which was progress in relation to Casement Park. And there may have been other issues, so I think it would be helpful to get an update on that, given they've got to give us an update and Tell Us Once, if members are content, to get an update on Casement and indeed any other related matters. Members are content. Okay. 15th of October, members, 5.9 is from page 280 of the meeting pack. The department has provided responses to queries following the meeting on 15th of October, which we'll now move on to. So 5.10 relates to 282 in the meeting pack, page 282. The committee had asked the department if its recent report aligning the budget to the PFG would be a good source of information for the AERC, the Assembly Executive Review Committee. The department has indicated that the report is, quote unquote, not a cross-cutting executive strategy in and of itself, and that the questions asked as part of the AERC review survey does not readily apply to the report itself. I think it was me who raised this initially. I'm not going to chase the department's tail or our tail on this any further, but I would say that it's just a wee bit disappointing that there's not any particularly more developed analysis on this, because it just, given that this bit of research has been done on delivery in a cross-cutting way, i.e. how the PFG relates to the budget, both of which are supposed to be cross-cutting, or supposed to have cross-cutting elements, and a cross-cutting approach is supposed to be fundamental to both of them, that they can't really relate them to this, to the ARC review. But I'm not going to pursue the matter anymore. I think I've slightly illustrated the point that there's not a huge amount of thinking going on in the department, but that's my own personal view. Okay, 511 is another data readout response that relates to rating policy follow-up requests. That's at page 283 of the meeting pack. So, members, we had asked queries relating to rating policy on number 1, halls of residence, which is there, which sets out why, or the legislative basis on which halls of residence, which is Article 42 of the Rates Order 1977, or 42, sorry, of the Rates Order, which removes that, or included that provision. Community wealth building and development activity, and how the rating system supports that. There's a bit of text there, and the rating liability for Parliament buildings, which was a total of £843,000.
Sure.
Brian Kingston.
I'd raised the question about the student accommodation, so
yeah.
I'm pleased to note that at the top of page 284, no privately operated student accommodation blocks have been granted exemption from non-domestic rating, so that tallies with what they said at the meeting, whilst I understand directly university-owned ones are exempt because they're charities, but there's been the growth of the privately operated ones, and they are paying rates, so that's what I was seeking clarification on.
Okay. Thanks, members. So that's to note, unless anybody wishes to come in any other bit of it. The next agenda item relates to, is in the tabled pack. It's at page 98 of the tabled pack, and it relates to procurement of the large contract, which has just been, the procurement of which has just begun. The committee previously discussed the replacement agency work contract in the Northern Ireland Civil Service and asked the Department for some information in relation to increased costs and contract management. A response has now been received. The breakdown of the change in contract value and key drivers is provided along with information on vacancy levels and recruitment. Now, I don't know if anybody wishes to come in on this. I think there's some interesting stuff in here. I would suggest that it's going to be very useful whenever we come in earnest to our civil service and our civil service people inquiry. Obviously, the increase is enormous. It's basically a threefold increase. You see the increase, it goes from the 2021 contract, which was just 4 years ago, was 425 million, and it's now 1.44 billion. So that is a ballooning, really, of the value of this contract. Obviously, the main driver of it is DFC, but it's not only DFC, there are other factors that they mention. Inflation and minimum living wage obviously have both gone up. I'm not sure they've quite gone up to the extent of like that level of increase. So I think we are going to need to investigate these more, because this is really a very large increase. But I'm going to bring in other members if they wish to come in. Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And yes, I agree with you. And as it moves on to our inquiry, it's just getting to the bottom of the numbers and what they actually mean. I think the way that I understand it is that it's because of the way the Department for Communities administers the DWP contract. The £1 billion is classified as agency for the purposes of procurement, but actually it's the 0.44 billion, the £500 million is actually the agency framework for management of agency staff as they drop in and out of the civil service. And today or yesterday, the NISRA report on civil service sick leave was out, and the value of that, and the commentary around it includes things from the high level of vacancies. There's the agency numbers that we have here, and I think that it's just really, really important that we get a full understanding of all of this, because you've got the cost of the agency, you've got these carried forward vacancies that we've talked about before that are sitting as savings lines on budgets. How many of them are real vacancies? How many of these people are coming in on agency contracts to posts that are they actual vacancies? Are they not vacancies? And the contributing factor to the sick leave and the costs associated with that. So I think that all of these issues are so intertwined. We really need to just take them all together, because I don't think that we can look at any of them in isolation, and it's huge amounts of money, especially as we're looking at the budget that we are and potentials for public sector transformation. But I just think, we're looking at the agencies there. I think that we just need to look at it hand in hand with carried forward vacancies, the need for zero-based budgeting, and just reform of the entire HR system and how they're reporting that, which our inquiry hopefully will be covering.
Yeah, well, this is definitely going to be really important for the inquiry. I would just say another thing, which is another bit of information which might be it's useful to drill down into. So the total value of the contract is obviously 1.4 billion, or the 1 billion of which is Department of Communities. But under Lot 2, which is administration rules that exclude DFC, is 300 million, which is not far off the total value of the entire contract a few years ago. So I suppose if they could draw out what exactly, not exactly what rules as in down to each individual job title or job description, but there's a little bit of detail there, but not huge amounts. So obviously talk about resourcing on, additional pressures, Loch Ney protocol, Windsor framework, high priority PFG, but those are they're not creating an extra £300 million worth of pressure. So if a bit more, if possible, than 300 million, I think, because we can understand or have a sense of the DFC one, or I still want a lot more understanding of the DFC element of it, and obviously that's cost neutral in the sense that DWP pay them for it. Yeah. But I want to understand what exactly is the. When I say exactly, I don't mean, as I say, down to the individual job titles, but in more specificity what the 300 million is composed of.
Give us a fair bit of detail, Chair.
Sorry, Steve Aiken.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm being very cautious in what I say because of our previous briefings in camera, but it does seem to be a bit incongruous about their reporting the particular values and the amount of red indications we've seen before. I just want that highlighted, and I think that sort of adds further grist to the mill about we need to get that previous area of reporting more open. But I'm being very cautious in what I say.
Okay. Fair enough.
No one else is
okay, remember, so we're going to get more detail, specifically in the 300 million, but we will also, that is going to be kind of top of our to-do list or to scrutinise list for our inquiry, or very close to the top. Okay, so we're going on back to the main pack to an extract or responses from the 22nd of October queries that we raised. The Water Sustainable Drainage and Flood Management Bill is item 5.13, and it's page 287 of the pack. The Department was asked if it has any policy locus within the provisions of the bill, and has now provided information in relation to building regs, flood rates relief, budget and funding for DFI urban drainage proposals. So, members, that we need to have a discussion and decide whether we wish to make a response to the Infrastructure Committee's call for evidence on the bill. We don't have to, but given there are bits that specifically relate to finance, we can have a discussion on it. Does anybody wish to come in? Deputy Chair, yeah.
Yeah, it's not our area of speciality or expertise here, but I don't have any objection to the items there, but just would be keen to flag that from a finance perspective, that we just would be keen that they take steps for good financial governance, safeguarding controls, that budget's considered under every provision. That would be what I would consider to be fair feedback from us at this point, without any detailed briefings on any of the elements.
Yes, yeah, I mean, it doesn't, as far as I can see, it doesn't create any new burden. This bill, it doesn't create any, there's where yes. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I'll make that in a second, but so far as I can see, the Department's response the Department satisfied that there's not creating any new burdens for the Department, other than we need to ask its view about budgetary provision and whether they are satisfied that same is that there's adequate budget provision. Okay, yeah, we can ask that question too. Yeah, we could ask whether there will need to be a subsequent bid for any funding requirements for DFI in relation to implementing the bill, if people are content with that. Okay. Next agenda item is 5.14 and relates to the AO recruitment pilot. So, members will remember our discussion about an organisation called Talent Dog. The committee has previously asked for information on the AO recruitment pilot. We considered on the 22nd of October. The department has provided the rationale for the sub-regional approach for the recruitment, information on exactly what Talent Dog is, and information on the benefits of this exercise and how it will fulfil equality obligations. So, members, does anybody wish to raise any concerns following, or questions or comments? I would like to ask whether specifically, I think for full clarity, it would be helpful to understand whether and what artificial intelligence tools Talent Dog is using to sift information. I don't think they don't need to give us precisely the name of the large language model, not that I would necessarily understand what any of it meant, but their information on what Talent Dog is says it is a global management company, especially. I don't think that's a management company is a poor use of language for me, because a management company could be could manage property, or it could manage, it doesn't say it's a people management company or a recruitment management company. They do say it specialises in fast, high-volume hiring. It says the organisation provides technology and operational support. I'd just like to know how and what is that. Does that mean that a vast number of CVs or applications are poured in, and then it's all automated? And that may be an entirely appropriate and use of artificial intelligence tools. I just think it's completely reasonable for us to ask and be abreast of how these tools are becoming used in the public sector. That's a reasonable question to ask, and it's not to take a view that it's necessarily a good or bad thing for them to be used. It's just to have clarity on whether that's what's happening, because they don't say it. It says, it just says that it is a management company which uses technology. I think it should be more specific about what technology it uses and how and for what purpose in relation to this SIFT or this recruitment process. Jerry Carroll.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Just kind of on the back of that, I think you hear somebody else ask the last time whether it's sort of an AI type product.
I haven't answered.
It didn't say that, did it?
I did ask that question, and it doesn't say.
It doesn't answer. So just to kind of tease that out, what you were saying, and also it mentions about it being used in it being Talent Dog being used in TransLink and across the trusts. Can we get a breakdown of what kind of total contract / payment this company receives? And there was a third question, but I've forgotten it now because I didn't write it down. Give me a second, I'll try and go back.
No problem. You can. I mean, I think we can ask those questions. Given they have told us the TransLink Health and Social Care Trusts are using them, it's reasonable for us to ask the value of those. We could also.
Sorry, Chair. The final thing,
yes.
Sorry, Chair, was the storage of, like, do we know what data Talent Dog is storing? I don't think it answered that in the question, because obviously we've had data breaches of sorts, and I'd be concerned if they're holding large amounts of people's information, both successful applicants and unsuccessful ones.
It does say it's GDPR compliant and hosted in the EU. So so they do say that, but we can I mean, if there's a specific, I mean, they do give us a response that's fully GDPR compliant and EU hosted, and we can say, I mean, I'm happy to I'm not sure what more, if there's anything more specific. I'm not totally sure what more we could ask for in relation to the, as in, I'm not sure I'm completely qualified to know what further question I should be asking on that particular front.
They do use, they talk about a trademark
GDPR
platform called Recruit
DAC.
We're just, their website's not available at the minute.
Okay.
But it'll be updated soon.
Okay.
Alarm bells.
As well.
Okay. Here's a suggestion. What the question we'll ask is, who or what bit of the department or what other entity has to sign off on the data protection element of this, given the scale of data they are getting. I think we can ask that question reasonably. This is not to, by the way, if anybody is watching from Talent Dog or any other canine-related AI recruitment platform, we're simply asking the question because I think it's important that we get to the bottom of it all. Yes, Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to suggest, we had noted down that next week we were bringing in the Permanent Secretary accompanied by an HR person in relation to another issue. Maybe that would be
that might be a good opportunity to ask those questions
at that point.
That might be that. Yes, we're now adding on. Now that we have them in, we're adding on lots of other things, but that's probably to be expected.
That's how it works.
That's how it works. Okay, grand. Members are happy enough. We'll move on. Okay. So next item is we're going back to the tabled pack, and it relates to shared property management. It's at page 107 of the tabled pack. The department has indicated that substantial work on the shared property management will begin in the new financial year, depending on the outcome. Legislation may be considered for introduction in the next mandate. Yeah. Okay, members are content with that? Yeah, Deputy Chair.
Yeah, just to highlight, we had raised this. It is an issue of a lot of concern, and I've had a number of constituents in touch with me on this. So just as work commences on it in the new financial year, it will be a year and a half after that. That still remains in the mandate. I would be keen to keep getting an update as to how that progresses throughout next year, rather than just park it.
Yes, I think that's really important actually, because I have, without, it's an interest to declare, I've got particular issues in one or two properties, which I won't name, in my constituency, who have had consistent challenges in relation to these issues, and they are bemoan, and there are certain properties where they are now so long in the tooth in dealing with what they would see as irresponsible management companies, that they want to see legislation brought forward, and they're aware of the gaps in our legislation. So I think rather than simply saying, well, we'll do some work and we'll consider it in the next mandate, it would be helpful to understand precisely what the parameters are and whether and what could be done, so that for example, political parties can take forward their own proposals and they can decide whether they want to include it in manifestos. If it is accepted that the executive is now timed out, if that's the implication, is that the executive is timed out from legislating itself on this before the next election, I think we would need to have more clarity on what precisely a legislative response would look like. So I agree with the Deputy Chair on that. Members are content? Okay. We'll go on now to 5.32, which is the Marriage and Civil Partnership bill. That's at page 108 of the tabled pack. The department has indicated that the bill is in the final stages of drafting, and officials continue to liaise with OLC. It is still anticipated that the bill will be ready for introduction for the end of the year, subject to executive approval. First and second stage will be anticipated in January, and the following stages are obviously subject to committee stage. Everyone content with that? That's to note. 5.15 and 5.16 are, we're going back to the main pack, sorry, for this. They're page 290 and 298 of the main pack. The Justice Committee has written to the Department of Finance regarding access to the bar of NI for students. The Justice Committee wrote to the Department of Finance for its view on the correspondence, given the Department of Finance is responsibility for the regulation of legal professions. The Department has replied, and this committee is copied into the response. The response indicates the matters raised, that the matters raised are not matters the Department would intervene in, and that the Bar Council is dealing with this issue. So, members, this is another opportunity for me to say this is a bizarre anomaly yet again, that we are our time is being being taken up by dealing with regulation of the legal profession, which is an extremely important subject. But it is weird, frankly, that it keeps coming back to the Committee for Finance and the Department for Finance, both of whom have better things to do. This should clearly be the ambit of the Justice Minister and the Justice Department and the Justice Committee, not ours. I think, like in every other jurisdiction, certainly on these islands that I'm aware of, regulation of the legal profession is done by the Ministry or the Department of Justice. It seems surreal that we aren't. One of the arguments kind of canvassed for this strange situation is that sometimes it's better to have regulation of a profession sit in a different department than a different host department than the department who is the main, as it were, governing or stakeholder department. That doesn't apply to anything else. The Department of Finance doesn't regulate GPs or doctors or physios or accountants. So I just think this is a bit weird, to be honest, and I've made that point, but I've said it so many times that people are probably bored hearing me. Anyway, Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I agree with the sentiments. And we had, the Legal Service Oversight Commissioner come through this committee recently, and we have another issue here. And I agree that this is clearly something that sits within the justice system, but I'm also just concerned that there is a legitimate issue coming through here with access to the Bar of Northern Ireland for students, and someone's taken the time to write about an anomaly and a challenge that is faced here, and I don't want to see the issue fall between the cracks just because it's bouncing between a couple of different committees here. So if ultimately the responsibility for oversight does sit with the Department of Finance, I would propose we maybe highlight this and bring it to the attention of the Minister, just in the interest of the Committee of Justice feel it's not justice. They've passed it to us, and rather than us saying we're just dissatisfied at the discrepancy, I think there's an important issue to raise, and maybe could we bring it to the attention of the Minister to make sure that someone is looking at this issue? I
think this is a really, so you're right to say, and to say this is a really important issue. Effectively, the correspondence from the individual highlights the ways in which it is more difficult financially to access the bar in Northern Ireland than it is in other jurisdictions in the UK specifically, or England and Wales. I think, well, obviously Scotland's an entirely different system. They don't mention the South. That is particularly given we know that there's long-standing issues with people from working class or, frankly, less wealthy backgrounds in general being able to get into the bar, and that isn't good for equality, not good for the legal profession overall. So they are legitimate questions, and so I'm perfectly happy for us to write to. I'll bring in others. Brian Kingston wants to come in. Perfectly happy for us to write to the Minister for Finance for his view on this, on any action he has taken, possibly in conjunction with the Minister of Justice, and maybe this is an opportunity for him to start to think about addressing the anomaly of departmental responsibility. But I think there is a real challenge here. I would also say, I do think, and just put it on the record, I do think there's actually an issue with the legal profession in general, feeling that they are not being heard. There's clearly an issue here with people in the legal profession, or people who want to get into one part of the legal profession, feeling that it's too difficult. And this gap in policy making isn't particularly healthy in my view. But we'll bring in Brian Kingston.
Well, just first declare I'm a member of the Justice Committee.
You'd be happy to take on this work?
Well, I'm happy to look into any issue that's raised with us. I mean, I don't know the detail of this. I mean, the Inns of Court in England in particular, I mean, I don't know, are they privately funded or is it statutory funding? So
I don't think it's statutory funding, I have to say.
Yeah, but, I'm assuming it's, well, the scholarships, that usually means some sort of private funding. So whether there just isn't the same volume of companies here, and for barristers. But
we don't have Inns of Court here. Yeah. It's a separate with the Bar Library. And
talks about one Inn of Court. Honourable Society for the Inn of Court.
Yeah, they all operate under the bar name of the Bar Library.
Yeah. So, but I am aware of this, that whilst barristers can earn very handsome sums later on for starting off, it's very, very, and they're scraping about for opportunities, and with no core salary. So, no, happy to look into this more, but certainly that's one of the issues I'd be asking about. The ones in England in particular and Wales, whether it's actually private funding.
So, if members could, what we'll do is write to the Minister and say what work is going on in the Executive in terms of with a specific view to the point that I made about responsibility. And I don't make it to get work off our table just because I'm slightly concerned that it is falling through and it doesn't naturally sit with us. If needs be, I'm happy to do an evidence session at some point in this. I'm happy to flush some of these issues out and get people in front of us who want to talk about them, including the Bar Council, representatives of the Bar, representatives of the legal profession, because clearly there is a sense that some of these issues aren't being looked at properly. If members are content, we'll do that, and we'll hear back from the department. Okay. 5.17 City and Growth Deals Quarterly Progress Report. That's at page 306 of the pack. That is about highlights issues in relation to City and Growth Deals. It's to note, but there is one particular issue is going to flag to members, which is around the Mid-South West Growth Deal and council ownership of it. I think we're going to look into that because it's a little bit strange that they're apparently not owning that, and so if the department and or the council could give us a view on why that is, that would be helpful, so that we are aware of it. I think, are we still hearing something back about gondola, or are we waiting something on gondola, or are we?
We Chair, the committee has written to both the department and the council around that one to seek clarification of both their expectations. We're still waiting for a response from the executive board of City and Growth.
They've said basically they have longer. They think they have longer.
It seems to be a misalignment of the times, the length of time that there is to actually put in a bid.
Okay, Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And to declare, my dad is a councillor on Newry and Down District Council, and it's just this quarterly report, in my opinion, is in conflict with correspondence that we had previously received in this. So it's being stated very clearly here, because this was from my previous correspondence with the Minister for Finance, that the understanding of Department of Finance seems to be that there is a new project for the Mourne Mountain Gateway, which was replacing the gondola project, and it was being developed and it was advanced, and the £30 million, there was still a potential to deliver it. Then we received correspondence to this committee from the council, which said, yeah, we've got another 6 months to come up with something, and that is my understanding locally, that they haven't came up with a replacement. There is no proposal, there's nothing being developed, there's no permissions in place, and if they think that they've got until next May to come up with something, it's not. I'm just really concerned, and that's why I had raised after the previous letter, can we get a clear understanding of what the Department of Finance's understanding is? Because from reading this and the previous correspondence, I think the Department of Finance think that something is well advanced here and the money's not at risk of being lost, whereas I am much more concerned than that. It's £30 million of external money to come to the district that I represent, and I don't think that it's progressing at pace, and it's significantly at risk.
What was the most recent update we had from the council? The council have said, the council's view is that they're looking at it.
They're communicating with the board.
So
we asked the board.
They think that they've got 6 months to come up with an idea to take to the board.
Wow.
Okay, and the department has said.
Literally just got a response.
This is brilliant, real time.
It's
people
quite
think
scary, Charlie. It's quite scary.
Maybe
So
they're listening to us. Okay.
If members are agreeable, I'll just
Maybe
read this
yeah.
out. So this has come through from Belfast City Council. John Walsh is the chief executive. So in response to your letter dated 3rd November, I can confirm the executive board, this is the Belfast City and Region deal, have not agreed a specific time frame for Newry, Mourne and Down District Council to submit an alternative proposal. Following discussion with the Council and given the length of time it will take to develop a business case and receive necessary approvals, it expects an initial proposal to be presented to the board within the next 6 to 9 months. Belfast City Region deal, Executive Board and Newry, Mourne and Down District Council will also liaise with Tourism NI and government departments on any alternatives. So he's saying 6 to 9 months for an initial proposal. So,
Chair, to my point, it seems pretty unrealistic that this project will be completed by the 2030, which is required within this wider scheme for the Treasury approval. So if they're only getting an initial proposal in, they have to consult, they have to get planning, they have to do all of those things. So that's my concern here, that it's...
I suppose then we can...
being forwarded now.
We forward that right. Yeah. So I think then it's reasonable to write to the department, I suppose Jelly and that team, that they are, that is the owner or the manager, or whatever the term is, I've forgotten, the department's responsible person for City and Growth deals, to say, are you confident that the timelines are still deliverable on the basis of this? I suppose they will say it depends what project they come up with. So, and I guess an ancillary to that question is, how much flexibility is there by the, like, if something is, you know, does it have to be built by 2030? Does it have to be accepting punters if it's an attraction by 2030? Does it have to be whatever? So we can ask those questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Grand. 5.18 is at 311. It's from the Infrastructure Committee. The committee has been copied in to a response to the Infrastructure Committee regarding the October monitoring round and multi-year budgets. So that is a response from the Minister of Finance, who explains that the October monitoring round is now a December monitoring round. He also, he sets out the timelines which we have already been made aware of in relation to the December monitoring round. It does highlight to me something that I think we need to, that I had intended to mention earlier on. I think we do need to be get a bit of assurance from the department on, which is that we are definitely going to get a multi-year budget before the end of the year, and that it'll be ideally, in my view, not just while the department we are sitting, but ideally while we're sitting before we have our last plenary session of Christmas, because to be honest, I should put this on the record with the department here. Last year we got, I believe, the 25-26 budget was released kind of in what football fans of a certain vintage will remember as Fergie time, which is basically in the 91st minute of the period before Christmas recess last year, on what publicans sometimes call Black Eye Friday, basically, and it landed into our inbox. That's not acceptable. If we're getting a multi-year budget, it needs to be, we need to get sight of it as not just the Finance Committee, but the Assembly as a whole, ideally before the end of the year, and certainly before, and certainly while we're still able to talk about it in plenary, rather than just slightly before Christmas, or certainly in the new year. I think we need to get clarity on that urgently from the department, that is still their intention. Members are content that we do that. It has reminded me now that we have that matter from the Infrastructure Committee. Members are content? Okay. 5.19 is from the Communities Committee, and it relates to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. It's at page 314. The Communities Committee has written to both the Department of Finance and the Department for Economy regarding the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and concerns about the absence of replacement funding. This committee has been provided with a copy of the correspondence to the Communities DALO. The Communities Committee has also requested this committee's views on the potential for a joint letter to the Department of Finance and to the UK Treasury expressing concerns, and ask what work is ongoing to expedite any replacement fund. So members, I've no particular objection to that in principle, but what I would say is we've already corresponded with the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, so it would be slightly superfluous. If members are content, we can flag that and we can share the correspondence.
Sure, we've had responses on in both those ways. We've also had correspondence and responses now on the new Growth Mission Fund. So if members are content, we'll just share all that correspondence with the Communities Committee.
And they can write back saying, we know our colleagues in the Finance Committee have already written to you. People content with that? Yeah. Okay. 5.20 is the Assembly Executive Review Committee. I should declare an interest. I also sit in that committee. That is in relation to a review of handling of statutory instruments. It's at page 316 of the meeting pack. AERC are carrying out a review into the development of a formal process and guidance in the handling of Westminster statutory instruments, and are seeking examples of any SIs this committee may have handled. So, members, this committee has only handled 3 SIs since the Assembly returned, all related to pensions matters. Statutory instrument is a Westminster thing rather than a statutory rule, which is a Stormont thing.
Communities would see a lot. Other committees see more. Finance is historically we get very few.
Okay, so if members are content, we'll inform AERC about those SIs. 5.21 is also from AERC. It's their review of Assembly Committee engagement on executive cross-cutting strategies. That's at page 323 of the meeting pack. AERC has shared a list of departments which have provided substantive written submissions to its review. That's to note. 5.22 is from the Fiscal Council. They've given us a response to the department's report aligning budget to programme for government. They welcome it as a first step in mapping out the PFG strands against current expenditure and providing increased transparency. The Council also highlights that a high-level exercise like this for each budget could contribute to transparency and to debate about the funding of different programme for government aims. However, it suggests that there is less value in updating this more regularly until it can be done more quickly and accurately by automation, interestingly enough. So it's quite an interesting detailed response from Sir Robert Choate there. He does note at the very end that the Council has no plans at this stage to analyse the fiscal impacts of the PFG, and that's something that we may want to think about when it comes to the Fiscal Council bill. But anyway,
We have Sir Robert up next week for the Fiscal Council bill, but it might just be worth, if members have any kind of queries or want to discuss that, to raise it with them.
Okay, members. 5.23 is the item that we just discussed, and it is letters back from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, in relation to the Assembly budget announcement and sorry, not the budget announcement, i.e. This year's budget announcement, and also the Growth Mission Fund. He has provided assurance that devolution impacts are considered as part of the budget making process. He would say that, wouldn't he? I'm just saying, but and the NI executive will be briefed on budget day, like everyone else, basically, the 26th of November. The CSC has also asked for suggestions for projects in Northern Ireland that could be put forward as part of the Growth Mission Fund. He has indicated that all UK government departments and devolved governments must live within the budget set at the spending review, highlighting recent settlements for CDEL and RDEL. Okay, so if members are content, we will send those on to the Communities and Economy Committee and flag that the letter is marked sensitive. Members are content with that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. 5.24 is the NI Scrutiny Committee, and it relates to an end to the committee's committee consideration. House of Lords NI Scrutiny Committee has formally ended its interest in a number of EU documents which were previously scrutinised by the now defunct subcommittee. They've informed us as a matter of courtesy, that's to note. 5.25, again, it is from the House of Lords NI Scrutiny Committee. It has begun its scrutiny for scrutiny to two EU proposals and is corresponding with the Exchequer Secretary of the Treasury were copied in as a courtesy. 5.26, revised outturn and forecast outturn. That's in the tabled pack. I'm sorry, did you wish to come in on this is in this one? That's at page 8 of the tabled pack. The department has provided the committee with revised guidelines for the 25-26 outturn and forecast outturn. They take immediate effect, and there is a new requirement for departments which do not expect to live within their budget. They should report an overspend rather than an overcommitment. Going forward, any reported overspends will be formally notified to Treasury. A copy of the guidance has been provided to members with changes tracked in red. So members, the outturn and forecast outturn is scheduled to be presented to the committee in a written briefing on the 26th of November, but I'm going to just briefly say something on this, and the Deputy Chair also wishes to come in. I think in addition to this, we need to, I was waiting until this item to talk about probably the most significant announcement that's happened in our space in the past week, which is the Executive, and the Finance Minister was very keen to say it was the Executive agreeing to the overspend or overcommitment. And interestingly, there's a distinction between the two offered here by the Health Department in order to meet the pay parity requirement for this year for health workers. Obviously, I'm sure most of us, all of us, would very much want the pay parity to be achieved and wanted healthcare workers to have been given this assurance. Speaking in a personal capacity, I don't think that they should have had the assurance read at the beginning of the financial year, not had to threaten strike action for it. But I do think it begs very significant questions, and indeed I asked an urgent question to the Minister earlier this week about, first of all, the credibility of, first of all, the principle of how this is going to be finally resolved. Are the multi-year budgets going to bake in pay parity over a multi-year period, so healthcare workers don't have to threaten strike every year? That's number one. Number two, does this culturally undermine, or kind of undermine the minister's position in relation to overspends and overcommitments in other departments, because we now have apparently one situation where one department is allowed an overcommitment on the basis of something we all want to happen, but they are now at the same time saying to all other departments, don't overspend, don't overcommit on pain of death. Third point, what the insert asterisk is what happens next year with the health department, because they're kind of starting with they're already starting with a pretty big overdraft for this year's pay settlement. They'll need to meet next year's pay parity settlement in addition to all of the other pressures, and they're already the biggest part of the executive budget. So, upshot, are we not simply, given what we know about the financial position, creating a huge problem for 26-27? Are we going to have that? Is that going to be resolved in advance in this year's multi-year budget? I think those are all very important questions. I'm not saying it was the wrong thing to do to use this vehicle to allow health to make this to pay health workers. I very much wanted health workers, and I'm sure we all did, to not have to threaten strike action. But I am very concerned about the way this has been handled and some of the onward consequences in terms of financial management and future certainty for health workers. So I wanted to put that on the record, and I think we need to get that information from the department, and we need to ensure that we're asking questions about it in the weeks ahead. But I'll bring in the Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. And I think that the principle of the changes in these guidelines is something that I have been highlighting for a while now. So we're seeing these hundreds of millions of overcommitments and inescapable pressures being reported, and we sort of know some of them are being inflated for different reasons as we enter monitoring rounds. So it's good to be able to keep the pressure on that we're forcing the difference between overcommitments and actual overspends. But my question around it is, the guidance was issued on the 10th of November to be applied to returns that were already due to be coming in on the 10th of November. So your outturn returns were supposed to be in by the 10th of November, and we normally ask how many came in on time. But now they've significantly changed what you need to do with your return, but they issued the guidance on the day that the returns were due. So I just wonder around that process point. So that was Monday. So they've issued this guidance to say the returns that were due today, we've completely changed the format, but they're still due today. So I just wanted a bit of clarity around that as to, they issued the new guidance on Monday. Did the departments have enough notice to know that the returns that were due on Monday should be in this completely different format? Or, should they be afforded another week on that? So I just want to make sure that these guidelines have had the opportunity to be able to be adopted in what's actually coming in from the different departments. Yeah,
I think, this is... I would like to know whether I think those are all sensible questions, but I would also like to know if the updated guidelines had anything to do with the decision that was made last week. And that may be entirely the wrong question, but I'd like to know the answer to it, just because it seems like a coincidence of timing. So, page 26. What has happened here?
So yours is there.
Yeah,
it's an entirely different page. I don't know why, but
that's okay. So, I just think it's very unusual that we're getting this updated guidance in the same week that one particular department is being allowed a huge overspend in order to meet in my view, morally correct and necessary pay settlement, but it has consequences in terms of overall management. We just need to understand that. So in addition to the questions the Deputy Chair raises, I think we also need to ask whether the timing of this new guidance had anything to do with the executive agreement on Department of Health overspend this year, and the machination for next year, in addition to the other questions around precedent. Members are content. Does anybody else wish to come in on this? No? Deirdre, Hargy?
Yeah, no, it doesn't hurt getting the clarity, but obviously the executive agreed to this, and my understanding is that the minister will manage this then within his next year's budget as well, the health minister. So, but it doesn't hurt to get the clarity.
I think that the part of the question is that the guidance that is issued by the department is fairly clearly you shouldn't be just doing massive overspends and then saying, that's grand, I'll manage it next year, because it's the most pressurised department, it's the biggest area of spend in the whole executive, and we know there are going to be additional pressures next year, and we know there'll be another pay, there'll be an additional pay settlement to meet next year. And indeed, obviously, as the department say in their own guidance, that there's this point about credibility with the Treasury. I'm concerned that, we know they are not exactly the most kind and understanding of interlocutors. If they are saying that we have already in this year, rather than baking in the money for this pay settlement at the beginning of the financial year, in the middle of the financial year, just said, okay, you can have a massive overspend this year and we'll sort it out next year, that does not really do our credibility any good when it comes to all of the other discussions that are going to have to happen. Go ahead, Deirdre.
Yeah, no, and I think, they come up the other day, and obviously question time with John, and I suppose the point that we're moving into multi-annual budgets. I think he stressed, even as the finance minister, that it will be down to ministers going forward, that they need to be looking at these. I think there's an exceptional thing here where there is the potential of strike. The workers are, entitled and due their pay. And obviously the executive have reached an agreement on that, which is good. But I think John stressed in the chamber the other day that, there is a responsibility on ministers going forward in terms of how they do that. I know some ministers did do that at the start of the year and others haven't. So it doesn't hurt reaffirming that again. And obviously the opportunity of 3-year budgets coming forward as well may provide more clarity as we move.
Yeah, I think that's, he definitely did make those points. I suppose the question would be what economists call the kind of moral hazard of not having done it the first time. You've now kind of, it's harder to say to X other minister, don't overspend on this, because having said all that, we'll get answers from the department, and we'll have the opportunity to ask officials and indeed the minister in a few weeks himself. But I do think there are real questions, and that's also important that we have the clarity that we're actually going to get the multi-year budget by this year, and ideally while we're still sitting, so that we can be sure that the pay settlements are going to be budgeted. So members, if we're content, we'll copy this correspondence and revised guidance to other statutory committees and the Assembly Audit Committee. I think it's very important. I think it's probably the most important thing we'll discuss this week, given the pressures involved and in various departments and the profile of it. Remember, Deputy Chair, yeah.
And can we ask for some clarity around the dates on this? As I say, the guidance was issued on the 10th to change the way the returns that were due on the 10th were actually due. So I just want
just to summarise, so I'm clear about what we're asking for. I think we need basically an update on the specifics of these guidelines. Yes, in relation to what the Deputy Chair just said, the question about guidance being issued on the 10th for returns which were due on that date, which is not particularly professional. But allied to that, the coincidence of this being immediately after, or in 1 working day or 2 working days after an agreement that one department would have an overspend that would have to be managed in the next financial year. So are those two linked? The question about credibility, both credibility of as it were, the finance minister with other ministers, number one, and indeed the credibility of the executive with the Treasury. Those are points. They're not my points. They're points that are made repeatedly by the finance minister and others. I think we need a response on both of those. And I think particularly if the Health Committee needs to reflect on this, because it already appears there's going to be a huge challenge at a bare minimum for that department from the start of the next financial year. And I think we're going to need to come back to this very quickly. Okay, members, if we're content with those things. Right. 5.27 LCM tracker. It's page 68 of the tabled pack. The department shared its bi-monthly tracker for LCMs. That is to note, unless anybody wishes to comment on it. Okay, 5.28 consultation report on the baby loss certificate scheme. That's at page 69 of the tabled pack. The department has provided the committee with a copy of its report on the consultation of the baby loss certification scheme. So this is published on Tuesday. So it's already published. Yeah. So it doesn't need you can ignore the. No, you can ignore. You can ignore the restriction on it because it has been published. It's indicated that the key findings of the consultation exercise will be incorporated into the ongoing work on the design of the operational scheme and the associated draft regs. It is hoped the scheme will be able to come into operation before the end of the current financial year. The report indicates that overall there is considerable alignment between the key findings of the consultational exercise and our original proposals. The learnings that have been drawn out highlighted several adjustments that can be made to improve the scheme. We will incorporate the alterations into the draft baby loss certification scheme regulations that will underpin the scheme. So members, if we're agreed that we get an updated timescale from the department on the draft regs, which is something we've all been interested in. Yep. Great. Now, are we doing that in written form? Yes.
Yeah, that's it. So, Chair, we are already running slightly late, so if we want to drop that one and come back to
Okay. And we're going to go on to committee deliberations in 7.
7.
Yeah. So members, we're now going to move to agenda item 7, which is the Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill. We are going to do some committee deliberations, and we have Hansard who are going to report for us, if we're all content with that. So, beginning at page 350 of the meeting pack, there are a number of papers relating to the Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill. Responses have now been received from the Communities Committee, Agriculture Committee and Executive Office Committee. These committees were asked to scrutinise their respective clauses within the bill. Firstly, the Agriculture Committee is at page 353. It has completed its scrutiny, indicating that it is content with both the clause itself, with the text, of the clause, and the ambition of the clause. That relates to clause 16, which is, if you have your bills in front of you, or either which is marine licensing. It has indicated some concerns around exemptions for certain types of marine licensing fees, but it has also highlighted the benefits of marine fees. Similarly, the Communities Committee at page 362 of the pack has completed its scrutiny of both clauses 12 and 13 and is supportive in principle of the policy objectives behind both clauses. It has highlighted a number of issues which will require follow-up work both by the committee and the Department for Communities. So that relates to clauses 12 and 13. I'll just remind people of what they do. So for the purposes of people's, so people are aware which bits we're actually relating to. So the communities bits relate to clause 12 and 13, which is investigation powers. It creates powers around investigation of housing association tenancy fraud, and 13 is the fun subject, I'm sure, for all of us, of councillor allowances. That's clause 13. So as I say, the Communities Committee has indicated they are supportive in principle of the policy objectives, but they have asked for, they mentioned a couple of bits of follow-up work, which I presume they are undertaking themselves rather than asking us to. The Executive Office Committee has come back to us. Their response is at page 379, and in their response relates to clauses 7, 9 and 10 of the bill. 7, 9 and 10, which relate to asylum and immigration support services. Number 1, clause 7. Number 8, clause 8, the provision of development opportunities for people who are applying for public appointments, or people required to hold public appointments, which is basically giving for TO the power to make payments under that, i.e. pay for skills training for people who are accepting public appointments. And clause 10 of the bill, which is supplementary powers relating to various powers under section 9, i.e. ending violence against women and girls. 7, 9, I mentioned 8, but actually they didn't mention 8 in their response, I don't think, or maybe they did. They did, we didn't. Okay. The committee just didn't come back on it, did they? No? Or did they mention it? Anyway, so those are, that is their response. It's not clear whether the Executive Office Committee is content or otherwise with the clauses relevant to its remit, or what scrutiny is carried out in this regard. So, members, I think we need to go back to the Executive Office Committee and reiterate to them that these are quite significant powers that touch on the work of their the department they're supposed to be scrutinising. and they just need to be clear about what is their content, or if they have no view, they should tell us they have no view, and they can't come to an agreement. But I think they do need to provide us with a
just so we know, Chair, because others have indicated, other committees have indicated that they are content, so we can move on from there. It's just they haven't.
Yeah, and we're talking about significant enough powers, or powers that relate to significant issue. Okay, so we'll agree to write back to them, ask them if they're completing their scrutiny, but actually say, guys, we would prefer if you were to give us a view more directly on 7, 8, 9 and 10, which, as I say, relate to things that are of quite significant importance: violence against women and girls, public appointments, support for asylum integration services. They're not trivial matters. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Education Committee's response, which is page...
Sorry, Chair, just wanted to come in there, Steve, on the Executive Office Committee. I just had my hand up there.
Yeah, I should say, members, by the way, at any point you can come in and, on any of these and stick your oar in, that's fine.
I agree with you. I agree fully with you, Chair. And maybe sort of the clerk could contact the clerk of the Executive Committee, because they are very substantial powers, and I can't really believe that the committee didn't spend a bit more time scrutinising it. But it would just worry me that maybe it just been waved through without really understanding what the implications were.
Chair, we need to be careful. They did get a briefing.
They did, yeah. So they did. Discussed. I understand they did get a briefing, and like the norm. Obviously, they've had correspondence from us, and they've corresponded with their own department. I just think effectively what we are doing is asking them whether they are satisfied with the due diligence that they and scrutiny that they have done on the powers in this bill which relate to their department. They are not, as it were, our powers. They are for them to scrutinise, and that's been the key thing all the way through this bill. I think it's also worth probably just me saying in parenthesis at this point that given the nature of this bill, there'll probably be significant amendments. We are not going to be in a position as a committee, and I've said this on the floor of the Assembly, I'm just saying it again now for the record, absolutely every single provision in this bill we won't be able to do to quote someone, a phrase that I think was used in this very room, every jot and tittle of this bill we will, by definition, we can't get into every power and every body, so that's why we're writing to other committees to get them to do their due diligence on powers. So just to say again to the Executive Office Committee, I don't think they're watching because they're happening right at this very moment. So, but if they watch back, if they hear, they should be satisfying themselves that they have scrutinised these powers, even if they're not coming to an agreed view on the clauses. They need to have understood them and scrutinised them and understood the meaning of them, and that's really important because it's not. We can understand in broad terms what the bill is doing, but we have to kind of outsource a fair bit of the scrutiny on this because of the nature of the powers. So, but yes, I mean, whether a private conversation is necessary or not, they should be doing it, and they have correspondence.
I agree, Chair, and I think the key point you came out with was due diligence. Yeah, I think that needs to be proven.
Grand. Okay, members. So we'll move on now. As I say, do jump in and indicate if you wish to come in any particular area in this, and then we have the bill clerk here with us to discuss any matters that arise from it. The Education Committee is at page 370. Well, I've just introduced the bill clerk, but he's not actually here to give us.
Well, he is over there.
So I have, and warm congratulations too.
Yes.
He's at page 370.
We'll deal with Nathan first before we do that.
Yes, don't worry, Nathan. We haven't forgotten you. Don't worry. The Education Committee is at page 370. Their response: they have copied correspondence from the Department of Education to queries about the legislative basis for the clauses specific to the department's work. So it isn't clear whether the committee is content with the clause relevant to it or what scrutiny it has carried out in this regard. And I suppose it would just make the point again to the Education Committee. You do need to discuss this and satisfy yourself that you have understood it. And if there are concerns about it, to raise them. If you are satisfied and able to indicate that you are broadly supportive of it, as other committees have, such as the ERA Committee in relation to marine licensing, we would welcome that, but it's not our job to completely understand or to completely scrutinise the detail of the powers being taken or being sought by your department in this bill. So just make that point again. Members are agreed. We'll write to the Education Committee in the same lines as we have written. We are going to write to the Executive Office Committee to ask if they are satisfied with the scrutiny of Clause 11. I'll just actually go back. Clause 11, it relates, it's pretty specific. It relates to postgraduate qualifications in educational psychology. So it's not a major area, but obviously it's basically about giving the department the power to fund costs in relation to that for presumably for educational psychologists.
Just worth pointing out at this particular moment, the Education Minister has indicated that he's seeking an amendment to Clause 11 to expand it out in terms of the bursaries that will be offered. So that brings a new and exciting twist to this. So we had obviously asked, the committee had obviously asked other committees to scrutinise the bill as drafted. So it'll be up to this committee to decide if it would actually like to bring in education officials to talk about that amendment, just so that the committee can be satisfied that it understands what's going on. It's not the bill as drafted, but it is obviously an expansion of one of the clauses, and we know about it in good time. So my advice to the committee would be that probably would be a good idea.
Committee rather than education.
Because we wouldn't necessarily expect them to go back and start looking at amendments again as well. We've asked them to look at the bill as drafted.
Okay.
So the committee can take that one on, and it would be one I would suggest we get that briefing.
Okay, although I would just restate the point that they need to understand. I mean, like the reason we've written out to all these to committees is that what has happened in this bill is that their department they scrutinise has sought additional via res to either do things in general, to make powers to do things, or to spend money on certain things, and we do not have the bandwidth to understand precisely a very bit of that. We should understand it in broad terms, and that is our job, but it's there on them to understand the challenges and issues for their department too. Steve Aiken?
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate that, Chair. I mean, if we go back to the briefing we had from Ray's about sort of the problems with this bill and it being an apples and oranges bill, this is just another example. If other amendments come in from other departments, we don't have the quite rightly, we don't have the bandwidth to do this, but what should have been basically a financial provisions bill is becoming a miscellaneous and any bill. And I have really grave concerns about the degree of scrutiny we can actually put this legislation under, because I don't think we've got the bandwidth to do it.
We're very good. We will.
What's that?
Sorry, no, we will do our very best.
Yes, we will.
Chair.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, we are scrutinising this bill. I think we've performed our function correctly thus far. I think the point is well made that it needs to be understood by other committees and every MLA and every other interested party that this is a very broad omnibus bill. So if they are, and it only creates powers to do things, it doesn't do the things themselves in large part, but if they are then concerned subsequently down the line that they weren't aware that a particular power had been taken, they had the opportunity during this process to understand exactly why it was being taken and ask the officials in the relevant departments to explain why, and it is their job to do that. So I think it is reasonable.
Do we know what the Education Minister is proposing?
Well, I think the clerk has just said that it is expanding the financial power to, so this is basically allowing the department to pay for, as far as I read it, it's broadly, to meet costs in relation to educational psychology qualifications. I presume he's expanding it for other areas.
So it's expanding into initial teacher education versus...
that's a big expansion.
We have
Chair.
that.
Sorry,
Steve?
Steve?
Got it there.
Sorry, that's a big expansion if he's expanding it to cover other areas of teacher education. I mean, that's a fairly substantive chunk.
Now, it's just 2 points. Number one, that is exactly the kind of thing that may well be totally reasonable for the Education Minister to do it. Yes, and we have it coming down later on. We're going to discuss the expansion of Clause 11. This is a legitimate thing. I don't know if the policy is right or wrong, but it's the sort of thing that it is legitimate for a minister to use legislation to do. However, given it's the Education Department and it's in the area, like, primary awareness of it does fall to the Education Committee. We can get the headlines and we can, I think, scrutinise whether it is a correct and satisfactory use of this bill in broad terms and advise the Assembly back, but we can't do all of the detailed scrutiny on the adequacy of teacher training funding, that's genuinely not our job, and I think it's really important to say that. I think I'm being unreasonable by saying that, am I?
There would be a financial implication that obviously this committee will be very interested in.
Yes, that yes, true, but in terms of some of the other details, policy-wise, we're not the primary policy scrutiny committee. So, having said that, are we content, members, that we write back to the Education Committee to ask if it's completed its scrutiny, if it is genuinely content with Clause 11, and subject, and then also that it is? I think we'll have to ask them what they are thinking about the proposed extension of Clause 11. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on Clause 11?
Can I come in
Do you want
next
to
bit?
come in the next one? Yeah, sure. So members, we're also agreed, I presume, that the responses from other committees will be reflected in the committee's report in the bill and will be added to the electronic bill folder. Now, members, we're going to come on to this. I mean, there are other. I give members the chance to raise more broadly, but. Actually, just at this point, does anybody else wish to raise any other concerns? First, Deputy Chair, and then anybody.
In light of the detailed conversations you've just had about education and TAO, I would like to re-highlight at page 375 the response from the Infrastructure Committee, because they've literally just forwarded a letter from the Infrastructure Minister on the issue of the charging on the smart passes, and I don't feel that the Infrastructure Committee has stated their opinion on the scrutiny of that. So I would like to go back in the spirit of the previous two ones to actually say, well, what do you think of this in terms of the fact that it sits as a negative resolution clause, because they've literally just said this is what the Infrastructure Minister wrote to us in committee and forwarded it to us. They don't even have a paragraph to say what the committee thinks about that. So that was
I can also jump in on that one. That was one of the key ones as well. Members will remember that the level of resolution had a bit of discussion around it, because while it's currently negative resolution, the committee did talk a little bit about the potential novelty of a first time that this would be brought under draft affirmative, and then it would revert to negative resolution once the parameters of charging had been kind of debated and were amendable under draft affirmative. So that's the other thing potentially it's worth reminding members at this stage, is it's not the policy intent is very much for other stat committees to focus on. However, the level of resolution is something that this committee will need to give some thought about, as the ESR had indicated. This is one where it might just be worth, and they are on our list for this, bringing in the officials to talk through their reasoning around going for negative resolution straight off. Just because it has come up in the committee, it's been a point of discussion, and it follows on from a lot of conversations the committee have had around draft affirmative in the issue of charging for baby loss certificates as well. So it's kind of the same sort of issue. So it was just because of the nature of what it was. So we have kind of provisionally got DFI down for having the officials come up around that one as well.
Okay.
Sorry,
Gemma.
I thought that it was up to each committee to scrutinise their relevant.
It is.
So why would we be getting DFI officials in here?
It's a courtesy that this committee sends it out to the subject committees.
Yeah, but why are we getting DFI officials in? Is that what you're saying?
So
Sorry, Chair.
Go ahead.
Because if we have further information we want, we won't necessarily put that back under the other committee. It's procedural. We would write to the minister and ask for his official, just so this committee has satisfied itself around the level of resolution. It's perhaps again worth pointing out that while the committee has asked other committees to do their own due diligence on this, the committee will need to copper fasten that itself. This is still a finance committee bill. The members, as ESR had indicated, the members need to report on this bill and send it back to the House completely sure that they have buttoned down everything they want to button down. So in that case, it would be perfectly normal to bring in officials from another department, particularly where you're looking at something like level of delegated power, because this committee has had that bit more insight as they've gone along, because we've had a previous bill and this has been an issue that's discussed. Obviously, there would be discussion with the other committee. This is not something that would be done without their input, but it's just to get officials to give evidence to this committee. We're also very conscious of the fact that other committees will have their own forward work plans, and as this is the Finance Committee's bill, it's kind of up to the Finance Committee to do all the extras. If that makes sense.
I suppose, I suppose further, we will complete the report. So we are the scrutiny committee. There's no,
Okay.
I mean, maybe when I said outsource, we're not outsourcing them doing their own reports on it. We will have to own the report.
Yeah.
The point I was making is that I think it's reasonable for us to say to them, you need to give us your view. Not you need to, they don't legally need to, they could ignore it if they want, but I think it is a reasonable expectation for us to say, are you satisfied with the detail of this? And I think this is now the time for us to do that. So that's why I think it's right for us to be direct with them about it.
Sure, it's also worth pointing out that this committee receives the legal advice, and the advice from the ESR. The other committees don't have specific access to that. So because it's legal advice, we have indicated to them that the ESR has indicated that the levels of delegated power are not inappropriate. However, we've also added the interpretation that was not necessarily where the story ends. So this committee has a lot of advantages in terms of having access to all that the other committees don't necessarily. So it's part of the exercise is making sure they know what's happening, making sure that they're aware of the bill and they have an understanding. But there are additional dynamics that this committee will be the one that has access to that.
Okay. Okay, members.
Yep.
So right. So we also members will also recall that the Audit Committee, Economy Committee, Infrastructure Committee have submitted similar returns regarding the scrutinies of clauses within the bill, which are at 356, 373, and 375. Also included is the nil return from the Justice Department. Now I think that's fair enough because I don't think there's anything very specific. What's that? Yeah, there's no specific clauses for them. And also they've got their own justice bill, which is so broad that they could probably attach anything they want to do into that. Okay.
Don't start another one of those, Chair.
Indeed. Also included for completeness is the nil return, as I said, so I just repeat myself from the Justice Committee. As outlined in the Clerk's memo at page 350, the committee will wish to consider which departments it wishes to call to provide oral evidence. We've kind of already discussed that, have we?
We generally have, Chair. So if members are content, we would look for DFI officials.
Yeah.
We would look for education officials, particularly on the amendment that they're going to lay. Obviously, we'll have to wait for that to be laid. Executive office officials, and again, we'll do that subsequent to further correspondence with that committee on sign-off. And what have I said? DFI, education, TEO, and obviously we still have more briefing to do with DOF officials as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, members are content. We will schedule briefings with officials from the relevant departments. Okay, so page 441 of the meeting pack is a raised paper on clause 18 of the bill, which is a paper which sets out a comparative perspective on the consolidated fund, advance limit for contingencies. It sets out a number of scrutiny points for the Department of Finance. It'll be added to the evidence base and electronic bill folder. There is also a related item in the table pack at page 102 of the table pack, is a Dallow readout response, which sets out further rationale for the Department requesting an increase to the contingency limit in terms of consolidated fund advances. The Department highlight the risk of delay, the impact of the 2% limit and the size of the limit compared to Scotland and Wales. So members will wish to consider this response as part of our discussion with the research briefing. Nathan, I think, got a copy of that before he arrived today. So thank you, Nathan, for coming to see us. We have Nathan Mulholland, who is a research officer at RAISE. Thank you for being patient as well, Nathan, while we went through other items. So please do give us an opening statement and indicate if you wish to ask a question, members.
Well, good afternoon, committee. Thank you for having me here today. I will briefly take you through the contents of the paper and then give the committee time for some questions. As the committee will recall, RAISE presented on the 17th September a bill paper on the Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill. At the meeting, the committee had requested further information on Clause 18 of the bill. Section 1 of the paper details Clause 18. The committee have been through this previously, so I won't go into too much detail, but just to remind that Clause 18 proposes to amend Article 6 of the Financial Provisions in Northern Ireland Order 1998 by increasing the limit of advances out of the Consolidated Fund for civil contingencies from 2 to 4%. So just moving then straight into Section 2. So Section 2 of the paper details and considers the use of Article 6 of the 1988 Order. Section 2.2 of the paper looks at the introduction of the 2% limit based on the authorised supply expenditure for the previous financial year. Article 6 was a response to Article 5 of the 1998 Order, which abolished the Northern Ireland Civil Contingencies Fund. The Civil Contingencies Fund in 1998 had a limit of £750,000 and was considered insufficient to meet the requests at the time. Rather than making an arrangement to legislate to increase the contingency fund year on year, the mechanism created in Article 6 was to make the advances out of the consolidated fund and was considered making it a simpler arrangement. By introducing the 2% limit, the amount available each year would increase in line with increases in the authorised expenditure available in Northern Ireland each year. So then turn to Table 1 of the paper on page 451. This presents recent advances out of the consolidated fund under Article 6. The first column presents written ministerial statements made since February 2024. These statements detail advances to be made to a particular department up to a maximum amount. The second column shows an itemised total of actual cash issued to each department or public body from the consolidated fund in relation to advances. These are published in the public income and expenditure accounts. RAISE were unable to identify written ministerial statements made before 2024. However, by going through the public income and expenditure accounts published each year, advances from Civil Contingencies Fund have been for each year have been established from 2009-10 and are presented in Table 2 at page 453. Prior to 2023-24 public expenditure and accounts, the amounts were presented as a total and not itemised as they are currently. I bring to the attention to the committee the financial year 2016-17 when over 42 million was advanced, but due to interrupted devolution, this was not repaid until 2021. This is because a repayment can only be made when the Assembly approval has been given to the excess incurred. I'll now move on to the annual 2% limit. As noted in the EFM, the accompanying the bill, increasing the limit is described as a prudent measure in order to safeguard against the risk that lower limits is not sufficient to ensure the continued provision of public services. At the previous meeting on the 17th of September, the committee indicated it would be interested to understand how close to the limit had the department been over the previous years. RAISE contacted DOF officials to seek clarification on this point. First detail was requested on what the actual 2% limit was in cash terms. Table 3 on page 455 of the pack details this. I would note the 2% limit in 2024-25 was equivalent to almost 479 million. Table 4 on page 456 of the pack then shows the total amount authorised for issue over the last 5 years. As we've seen in the table, during 2021-22, the amount authorised in these exceeded the 2% limit. Further, this Table 5 presents a series of notes detailing explanations of events and rationale that influence the need for such advances. So to detail some of those, advances authorised are to a maximum amount and the amounts issued may be less. For example, the expiry of the reason for seeking the advance. So if they've issued up to a maximum amount, the relevant budget bill then may be passed and therefore the total amount is not required. In addition, as detailed in Table 5, if a repayment is made during the year, the amount available to issue resets the 2% total. Therefore, the sum repay becomes available again in the same year. Therefore, as seen in Table 6 of in page 459 of your pack, for the financial years 2021 and 21-22, the amounts actually issued equated to 60% and 79% respectively of the total amount available in relation to the 2% limit. Moving on then, Section 3, we provide a part of analysis of similar legislation in relation to Scotland and Wales. The legislation from contingencies notes a number of similarities in each of those jurisdictions. So just to highlight a few points, both the limits in Scotland and Wales are 0.5%. The issue of such funds can only be authorised by the authority of a minister in Scotland and Wales, and where a resource has been issued under the relevant acts, ministers must, as soon as possible, lay a report before their relevant parliament. A summary of the legislation of each administration, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, can be found in Section 4 of the paper, page 467 of the pack. Notably, in the case of Scotland, the powers under Section 3 of the Public Finance Accounting Act Scotland have not been used. In Wales, the power granted under Section 128 of the Government of Wales Act 2006 for civil contingencies has been used once. This occurred in 2013 with the purchase of Cardiff International Airport. This purchase occurred very close to the end of the financial year, and the Finance Minister at the time noted the use of Section 1 was made for reasons of urgency, and it was not practical to move a budget motion to authorise the payment. I'll finish there. That was just a very brief overview, Chair, of what's in the paper, and take questions from the committee.
Okay, it's extremely thorough. Thank you, Nathan, and I think it's really unpacked a lot of the stuff for us. Just very briefly, could you explain, like very in headline terms, so Northern Ireland already has, on the face of it, limits that are significantly higher than Scotland and Wales. Are there any particular reasons why that is, that we have higher limits, and obviously we're looking for higher on top of that, or the Minister is?
As noted in the paper, the order was prior to the Assembly existing, and the committee session that I've highlighted from Westminster at the time debating this order noted that the pressures at the time were about 20 to 30 million. So I would assume, based on that, at that level at the time, officials made a judgment on the 2% as to why that was required at the time. Subsequently, why Scotland and Wales therefore were 0.5 in their legislation, they say it was 2000 to 2006, so sometime after their institutions were already established. I don't know exactly why 0.5 was chosen, but in relation to our own, I think if you look at what was being requested at the time when the order came in, perhaps some calculations were made at the time to come to the 2% figure, but again, that would need further clarification. As I say, that happened quite a long time ago, so I'm not sure exactly who might be aware of that.
Okay, whenever explain the difference between, so it is possible to draw down, to use Article 6 of the order when there's no assembly.
Yes,
which is well, you can't in Scotland and Wales, obviously, because they don't really foresee.
As you can see, I've given the legislation in all three administrations, and quite clearly in Article 6 it says the department, whereas in the legislation in both Scotland and Wales it is the minister will issue. So, as I say, that makes sense in terms of there was no minister at the time that the order first came in. There wasn't an assembly for a minister, so the department was the only body. That may be something to consider and ask further questions, but that's my understanding of the difference there as to the reason why it's the department and how the department then can operate on when there is no fully functioning assembly, because it's the power is given to the department, not directly to the minister.
Okay. I'm going to bring in other members now. Deputy Chair first of all.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for this detail. We have two documents here that's really useful for us to look at side by side. We've obviously got your report, and I want to jump to the table at page 16 of yours, which is page 456 of our pack, but also in our tabled pack we have a response sort of from the department at page 106 that sets out the levels of the advances and how much of the 2% authorised was actually used and how much of the 0.5% authorised was actually used. So in terms, and I know you really don't have that, but you know, it speaks to the figures that you have presented as well. So it's basically showing that in 2020, 2021 and 21-22, which you have in your report, those were the years of COVID.
Yes.
And it was extreme budget circumstances, and those are the only two times when the 0.5% that's acceptable everywhere else was exceeded, but it was never actually breached, because that's covered in your report, because you're actually showing here the percentage of the 2% that you've reached more than that. But the stars, you've got 3 stars and 4 stars. Whenever you actually scroll down, you're able to say that whilst the 2% was reached, the legislation was never breached, because you were able to bring forward sort of like, you know, emergency legislation, budget bills, and to keep things in order. So this is the point that I effectively have been trying to make, that I think that, you know, we already have 2%, which is more than everyone else. The 0.5%, probably from the numbers we have in our table pack, would have been enough anyway, because the only time that we were at risk of hitting it was during COVID, whenever it was an emergency situation, and at which point we were able to get the emergency legislation in place to cover that. So it actually didn't really matter that it was 0.5 or that it was 2, because it was, you know, going to be substantially more than usual anyway. And in both those instances we were able to get the approvals in place, so there never was actually a breach. So to come back to your report there, you're sort of showing that for those 2 years, when it was COVID, extreme circumstances, we hit the 2%, but there was never a breach because there was time to act in the emergency, which I would believe that there always would be if there's an emergency, you can always have some emergency to go ahead of that. But given that we're so far away from ever hitting the 2% in any other year when the Assembly has been up or down, I see no basis on which we need 4. And that's why I'm struggling to understand why this legislation has said we need to increase the authorised amount from 2% to 4%, because I don't see us actually hitting the 2%. Do you see from anything that that you've put together in this that there is a risk that we wouldn't have any processes in place that we could act?
What I would say on when we look at especially Table 4 with the authorised amount, with the fact of the when you repay, so if you're repaying, you could issue the full 100% in the middle of the year, repay that, you then would have your full basically 2% allowance, and you could do that again. So when you could have 200% there, but actually as long as you keep you're repaying that at some point in the year, that money becomes available again. So you're continually rolling that over if you are repaying. It's only when you don't have the ability to repay that money that the limit comes into sort of focus. So that's, they noted that in the, I think it's something to do with the utility regulator, that they perhaps were about to hit the limit, but by repayments coming into the utility from the utility regulator, that reset the budget to allow them then to issue to DOH at that time. So that's when you're on those limits, that if you don't get the repayment in, then your 2% limit's gone. So I think I don't know how close at that, in terms of that, the detail wasn't entirely there, and that is detail from the officials, so they maybe want to interrogate that more with them as to how close at that time were things, because that's literally just lifted from correspondence I had. So I'm not entirely sure the detail into that, but I know that that's their point, that without repayment there would have been more issues, is how they presented it to me. But again, that's something I think they could interrogate more with the officials.
Thank you. And sure, and on that one, and on the utility regulator, I know whenever it comes out, it's very much the time basis off the receipts and moving it around. And I know that it had came out, but it seems simple enough that whenever the profile is presented from the dear minister to the finance minister to say there's been a displacement of receipts, we've seen it. It's easy enough for the finance minister to say this is a timing thing. I'll approve this in the interim and move it around. I just see that it is being managed as it is, and I can't quite understand why we would double the percentage that you would have authorised on the face of the legislation if we don't have evidence of problems or reasons for it. So that was kind of,
as I say, it's not for me to make a decision on what right or wrong on that. It's just presenting the evidence as is.
Seems a lot higher than anywhere else when we're already higher.
As I say, in terms of the percentages, there seems to be more of a history that has been sort of ferreted out in that in the order, and what was being discussed in the Westminster Committee at the time, that this was that there was limits being reached at that period. Scotland, Wales, I say, when they were established, the brand new institutions where there's a bit more legacy here of sort of the older sort of Parliament, and that because the contingency fund, for example, I think that comes from the 1950 Northern Ireland. It might not be in there, but I do have the note. It was the Exchequer and Financial Provisions Act, Northern Ireland 1950. That's where the legislation for that contingency fund. So they saw that as being limited. 750,000 in 1950 was a lot more money than it would have been in 1998, and so they were trying to sort of tidy that section up by creating the 2% limit. So how that then carried on, I don't know in terms of the 0.5 and where the judgment was made in Scotland, Wales as to why that was their limit compared to ours. As I say, you could look at what was being requested in Northern Ireland in 98. They quote 20 to 30 million, and that the 2% at that time seemed reasonable. But say the circumstances and events since then maybe do more questions to be asked.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, and thanks for this. It's really, really good detail and lots of good citations in it, so it's very, very helpful. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to come in? We've nobody else who has indicated they wish to ask a question at this point, so I think we'll release you, Nathan. Thank you very much for coming and giving us evidence. So but I think it's important, members, there are scrutiny points that Nathan has suggested in his excellent paper that we will write to the department to get answers, if members are content with that. So now we're going to go on to pages 474 and 477 of the meeting pack, where there's correspondence from the Department of Finance regarding amendments to clauses 11 and 12 of 11, excuse me, and 20 of the bill. So 11 obviously relates to the thing we just discussed, actually, education and the educational psychologist payments, or the payments for training, and clause 20, which is, I think, about the audit matter, isn't it? The structure of how you appoint the auditor for the audit office. So work is ongoing to prepare an amended clause 11, which we have discussed and will be provided to us in due course. The department is also proposing to remove clause 20, which will have the effect of retaining responsibility for the appointment of the external auditor with the Department of Finance. Correspondence from the DOF to the Assembly's Audit Committee is also included for members' information. A DALO readout response at page 476 of the meeting pack also confirms the removal of clause 20 from the bill, and that the department will be engaging proactively with the NIAO and the Assembly Audit Committee on reconsidering of wider governance arrangements for the NIAO. I was just saying, kind of, I suppose, 2 points. Slightly strange that this is that it's happened this way, but it's the process of scrutiny. So obviously, us engaging and getting some of this information, getting the views of the Audit Committee has been useful in terms of all of this. I presume technically they can't just remove it from the bill. They'd have to.
It'll have to be an amendment to remove.
It'll have to be an amendment. Can the minister oppose to the stand part? Is that what happens?
Yeah, effectively, yeah.
Okay, and that'll happen at consideration stage, I presume. So members, seek agreement. Can we seek agreement acknowledging and welcoming the removal of clause 20? I think we had come to the view that it was going to be implausible for the Audit Committee to become a procurement body, and we'll add that to the committee stage bit of the bill and the bill folder. So members, are there any comment on this? Anybody wishes to raise that? No? Okay.
Sure, it's maybe just worth reflecting and reminding members that the previous Audit Committee had said that this would be okay. So it was kind of being inflicted as a legacy on the current Audit Committee, and I think that was where the department believed that it was fine to go ahead, but it has become very apparent that a huge amount more discussion needs to take place. So back burner, I suppose.
Back burner indeed,
rather than anything else.
Okay, members, so page 478 of the meeting pack, there's legal advice in clause 20 of the bill. Given the bill is now resolved, this is really for academic interests. It's no longer relevant because it's not going to stand part of the bill. Okay. So we're now going to go on to agenda item 8, which is the Northern Fiscal Council bill. We're going to go into closed session because we're going to consider legal advice. So members, before we go into closed session, we agreed to commission legal advice on whether or not it would be lawful for the Audit Committee to provide a budget scrutiny function to the NI Fiscal Council bill. This is relevant to what we were just discussing. Similar to the role it carries out for the NIAO and NIPSO, but it's not exactly the same because this is different from scrutinising its budget, which is effectively what it does already for the Audit Office. We're not suggesting that it literally procures the service. This advice has now been received and it's in the meeting pack. So members, we're going to go into closed session if you're agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, Stephen.
Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound.
Anything particularly? Do I need to?
Something a bit more now. Give us a sec till we get the cameras back up. This is, do you know, technology here. Oh, there we go. There we go now, Chair.
So,
that's us. We're back in.
So members, we are now back in open session. Do we need to? I think we're going to get. We don't need to formally record an agreement.
No,
We've got to,
it's going to be ultimately, yeah, it's going to be a further discussion basis and committee just plotting out, you know, how that would work into a bill.
Okay. So, members of page 493 of the meeting pack, we have a formal response from the Assembly's Audit Committee on the Fiscal Council Bill. The committee has broadly welcomed the bill, but drawn some issues to this committee's attention in relation to the potential role for the Audit Committee. As I said, it highlights concerns which could negatively impact its effectiveness as a committee carrying out its legislative functions and/or commitments, and also points out that any role for the Audit Committee in relation to the Fiscal Council, which is over and above its statutory role in relation to NIAO and NIPSA, which are both corporate souls, should be considered very carefully, as this might require those activities to be extended to all bodies for consistency, further impacting on the workload of the committee. More fundamentally, legal advice would need to be sought on whether any approach proposed by the Committee for Finance would potentially extend beyond the legislative remit powers of the Audit Committee. So we have discussed that we've discussed it in closed session, and we're going to hear. We will discuss it further. We'll discuss the challenges involved, and we can discuss it further when we have the Fiscal Council in front of us.
Yes, sure.
Okay.
If we go back to item 6 on page 17.
Agenda item 6 on page 17, which is
public procurement. The paper around possible exemption of ports from procurement legislation and Cabinet Office proposals for public procurement. So, Chair, this is a written briefing because we had officials were due to come. However, we had some incapacities and indisposals. It's quite complex, but if you want to go ahead, Chair.
So, members, this is page 110 and 115 of the tabled pack. We were due to receive an oral briefing from departmental officials on this item. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, an oral briefing is not possible. However, 2 written briefing papers have been provided to cover the items. They were not available in time for inclusion in the main meeting pack, but instead were emailed to the committee office just before 5 p.m. yesterday. Therefore, a revised table pack was issued. Firstly, a briefing paper was provided on a possible exemption of ports from procurement legislation, and a second briefing paper was also provided on Cabinet Office proposals for public procurement reform. The latter details some quite detailed reforms proposed by the Cabinet Office building on the Procurement Act 23. So, members, this is to consider the contents of the papers, and if you wish to consider any further information or make any comment in this regard, we can get a briefing on this in the new year.
I would strongly advise that, Chair, because this is complex.
Yes, I think we should do that. Members, we can get a briefing in the new year. Okay. Now we are going on to page 4. Oh yes, sorry. I should have also said that we're going to copy the correspondence in relation to the procurement legislation to the Infrastructure Committee. Members are agreed. Yeah, indeed. Okay. So, agenda item 9 is correspondence. We only have one item, which is from the report of the ESR, and there are no statutory rules relevant to us. Agenda item 10, draft forward work programme. Members, that's at page 506 of the meeting pack. The clerk will update us on that.
Chair, nothing much to say. We'll reschedule the permanent sec next week, and then next week we also have the Fiscal Council, the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council. Yes, think I've got that right in my head. So again, feeding into the Fiscal Council bill. That will conclude the external stakeholder oral evidence sessions that we've planned. So we've heard from Scotland, we've heard from Cherie, we've heard from the OECD, we'll hear from the Irish Council, and we'll also hear from the Fiscal Council itself. So I suppose it's members to have in the back of your minds if you think there's anyone else that is going to be particularly relevant before we go back to the department on that one.
Yeah, okay. 10 is draft forward work programme. We've discussed that. Agenda item 11 is any other business. Any member of any other business?
Just get agreement.
Oh, sorry.
Publish
we'll publish the draft forward work programme as always. Members agreed. 11 is any other business. Anybody have any other business they wish to discuss? Okay. 12 is date, time and place of next meeting. It'll be here, Senate Chamber, 2 p.m, Wednesday, 19th of November. I'm going to put the question, the committee do now adjourn. The committee is adjourned.
Senate Chamber. Sound.